So good afternoon and welcome to this meeting, Jobs in Transition. As I explained at the beginning, the idea of this meeting is really to have a dialogue and a conversation with people, company and professionals who are really engaged and involved in the ecological and energy transitions, those who are really making this transformation a reality. I am Enrica and I coordinate the PhD program in Science and Management of Climate Change at Foscari University. And today we have the opportunity to talk with Carbonsink and South Pole. And we will learn more about what these two companies do during the remaining hour. Our guests today, we have three people being with us today. So we have Flavia Ferrari. She's actually an analyst at Carbonsink, and she was also a former student of our master program in Science and Management of Climate Change, essentially because our program also has an internship phase, and she had the opportunity to start collaborating with Carbonsink during his master. We also have Mireille Menenses Campos. She's a consultant at South Pole. She is a climate change advisor and a consultant. And before joining South Pole, she was working for the Mexican Ministry of the Environment and Natural Resources. We also have Aurora D'Aprile. She's media and climate policy advisor at Carbonsink. Aurora, she's a climate policy expert and media professional. She has more than 10 years of experience in climate change and communication. Okay, I wouldn't spend more time myself talking about Carbonsink and South Pole, but I would rather let our guests to talk about their companies and their activities. So perhaps we can start with Aurora and Mireille. Maybe you could explain, let's say, what is the core business of Carbonsink and South Pole, trying also to explain how, let's say, the interest for climate-related issue came about. And I think for us it's also interesting to understand whether, let's say, it's a story of a changing business or it's a story of a new business that you started off. So I would leave the floor to Aurora and Mireille for a first round of presentations. And thank you again for accepting our invitation.
So I will start talking about Carbonsink for a very short introduction, then leave the floor to Mireille. So Carbonsink is a consulting firm providing climate strategies and decarbonization and climate risk management services for companies. It was founded in 2011 as a spin-off of the University of Florence, and today has offices in Florence, Milano, and Maputo in Mozambique. What we stressed is an integrated approach to climate strategy, trying to cover all aspects related to climate change for corporates. This means, for instance, measuring the carbon footprint of an organization, of a product or a service, understanding scope 3 emission, climate risk exposure of a company, and other activities that my colleague Flavia would better explain in a few minutes. It also means that we develop carbon management services, such as providing methodologies for setting an internal carbon price for corporates, or developing carbon projects through which companies can balance their emission and take responsibility of their emission. If we look at our story, now I can skip, yes, to our story. We can say that is both a new business, because we are 10, 11 years old, so we are quite young, but it's also a story of a business that is constantly changing. So it started with an idea of Andrea Maggianic, that is, he is the CEO of Carbonsink, when he was a young professional with an economic background. Of course, it was born, the Carbonsink was born as a spin-off in Florence, at the University of Florence. The first years were focused on developing the first carbon projects, such as the one in Maputo, Mozambique. This project involved the distribution of fuel-efficient cook stove to improve energy efficiency of households, conserve natural resources, and improve living conditions of the local communities. Carbonsink has always followed the development of international climate policies. So the Paris, we see that the Paris Agreement was indeed an accelerator for international climate action, and this trend is now clearly reflected in the business sector. We can see that every day. The past few years, I've seen a huge growth in terms of awareness, attention, request, and commitment from companies, and to provide more decarbonization services, such as how to set a science-based target, for instance. Carbonsink opened another office in Milano. Another office was opened also in Maputo, Mozambique, to support the local development of carbon project in Mozambique, but also in other African countries. What else? We are constantly growing. We are now 40 professionals, pretty young on average, because 75% of Carbonsink people is under 35 years old. Very committed and with a quite perfect balance, I would say, a quite perfect gender balance, because we almost equally split between men and women. At the beginning of this year, we proudly joined South Pole, that is an international leading provider of climate solutions and project developer. And now, with my great pleasure, I leave the floor to Mireille Menenses Campos to explain what South Pole does in its business and its activities. Mireille, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm really glad to be here with you today. So I don't have a detailed timeline of the history of South Pole, but I hope this slide that you are seeing in your screen depicts exactly how the company has been growing for the last 15 years. So South Pole was born in 2006, thanks to the ideas of 5 young social entrepreneurs. They got together and founded South Pole 15 years ago. From the beginning, for them, diversity, partnership, and this idea of entrepreneurship have been the key values of the company, and it's something that we have up until now. So as Aurora said, South Pole is a leading provider of global sustainability financing solutions and services. And we have over 500 experts spread across 20 global offices and 8 representations. And the number of offices is actually still growing. We have presence in the US, in New York, in LA, for example, Mexico City, in Colombia, we have 2 offices, in Bogota and Medellin, in London, where I am based, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, Singapore, Thailand, Jakarta, just to name a few. And we are expecting further growth in Africa, APAC, and Europe in the upcoming years. And now it is a pleasure for us now being working together with Carbonsink and expanding our presence to Italy as well. So as I said, South Pole has a track record of 15 years of experience working with a variety of clients from the public, private, but also civil sector organizations, and to help them accelerate their transition into a climate smart society. So the company expertise covers not only consultancy, but also project and technology finance, data and advisory on sustainability risks and opportunities, as well as the development of environmental commodities such as carbon and renewable energy credits. Just a couple of examples. So the motto of South Pole is "We act today for a better tomorrow," and that's how South Pole was actually created since 2016, because it's not only about new businesses, but it's a transformational way of working. This required transformation from a resource heavy to a low carbon sustainable economy requires a variety of top down, for example, policy and regulation, and bottom up interventions. So for example, voluntary initiatives by individual corporations. And that is what South Pole does. South Pole supports and enables change in both directions. So it's top down and bottom up. It's our work. It's all about changing actually how business is done, but at the same time exploring these new ways of supporting companies in their decarbonization journey. So we are very dynamic in that sense as a company. And just to wrap up the presentation of South Pole, we have over more than a decade, we have developed over 700 emission reduction projects covering different types of projects, from renewable energy, energy efficiency, but also forestry projects. I will leave the presentation of South Pole there.
Thank you. Maybe just one question to both Aurora and Mireille. Could you just say a few words about the type of clients you address? Is it only private sector? Is it also public administration, local administrations?
Okay, Mireille, please, if you want to wrap up some, so you can conclude the presentation part, and then I can answer from my side.
So in our case, and I think it's same as Carbonsink, that's the reason why now we are working together in this. We are not only focusing on corporate clients, we also try to understand and guide governments in designing targets, in developing new policies as well, but also engage with other civil society organization, philanthropies as well, to channel funding into carbon projects. It's not restricted to one specific type of client, and not only to one specific sector. We have worked with in the private, in the corporate side, we have worked with a variety of sectors, from oil and gas, renewable energy, cement companies, chemical companies, automotive companies. And what we are seeing is that all of them are now on board in developing their emission reduction targets. And it's our role to advise them on the best practices to achieve those targets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I quickly I can quickly say something about Carbonsink clients landscape, that is mostly, but not only, comprised of corporates. As Mireille said, we also have small and big companies of a wide variety of sector. So we can see that heavy emitting sectors such as logistics, oil and gas, also fashion, sectors with quite complex supply chain, global expansion, as really getting on board and start doing something about it. Also, we engage with the organization and partners from civil society to widen our offering and also our activities. So we are more than happy to collaborate with the civil society organization, advocacy groups, research center, and I mean in the Italian panorama.
Okay, thank you. I do have more questions, but I will keep them for the end, also because we have many people online and we want to give them also the opportunity to ask questions. So maybe let me ask you, let's say, a more direct question regarding the opportunities that could be for students, let's say, coming from different backgrounds, because in our program, but also let's say at Foscari in general, we have the Master in Science and Management of Climate Change. We also have a new master degree in Environmental Humanities. We have the programs at the Department of Science. So the question is, what could be the opportunity for students with very different backgrounds and who are interested in this type of career? So maybe Flavia and Mireille could give us some insights on these questions.
Yes, sure. So let me first thank you for the opportunity of being here. It's a privilege to bring my 2 cents in this. Yes, indeed, I will talk about my experience as I graduated last year in September. And actually, during the master, I had the opportunity to face like what are the multifaceted risks of climate change, and also and I thought also that it's important to bring up also the opportunities that are for companies and private sector, and the master provided me with also some tools to study climate change and to tackle it. So I was committed to explore the business sector, so the corporate, the private sector, and understand the dynamics that interlink climate policies, both international and domestic, and the private sector. And so it was the driver of my decision of like do the internship in company, and then I had the opportunity to do that in Carbonsink, and then I stayed and I had the chance to work here. And during the internship, yes, I could realize actually what are the most important trends and topics that private sector businesses are more interested in. So what they ask as clients, and also what actually the great increase that there has been in commitments and awareness of the private sector on the voluntary basis. So during the stage, I could monitor all this private commitment, understand the private sector, and also could work with the advisory team where now I work with. And for example, I could apply the knowledge about climate scenarios and apply them to I could see the usefulness for a company that is wanted to understand if they are in line with the pathway and to the goals that they have set, for example. But also I studied a lot. I got to learn more about climate scenarios, the Net Zero 2050 International Agency, for example. And speaking of that, actually, then when I started working with the advisory team, it's really been inspiring, actually, because it's a great, it's a privilege to take by hands company and try to help them in this decarbonization pathway, actually, since the measuring of the greenhouse gas emission. And about the opportunities, it's actually still also consultancy is a very cross-sectional job, because and the master and also many courses at Foscari provides you with multidisciplinary knowledge, actually tools, because you start from a very quantitative base, for example, that are very useful when a client asks you to, for example, assess the physical risk that his portfolio is facing. For example, let's talking about utilities company, oil and gas, or cement, and also defining the transition risk. And I guess that also for the stream about climate economic and finance, this is very interesting, and still is a huge, there is a huge increase in the importance of the climate-related financial disclosure as well. Moreover, a great part that is also Carbonsink is developing is the scenario analysis, and actually clients always or most often want to set targets, like the decarbonization target, hopefully science-based target, and for example, also sometimes they wanted to go for the net zero target, and so it's nice. It's really interesting to understand what net zero means, not at the global level, but also for a company, and try to understand this pathway toward it. And of course, what is last but not least, we start from the decarbonization strategy starts from the measurement of the carbon footprint. So it's of course the first step we usually do. And nowadays there is this every company asks for the assessment of the scope 3 emissions, so all the indirect emission, both upstream and downstream, related to the supply chain and value chain. And for example, if we think about the food sector, fashion, we always have to face the problem how to engage the supply chain, how to engage the suppliers, and to reduce their emission. So these are just some of the things that actually you will happen to work with when you are in a consultancy company that deals with climate change. And in my opinion, actually there is it's very important, and the master gave me the opportunity to understand not only the part very physical part, the dynamics of climate change, but it's also important to understand what are all the socioeconomic implications, because often there is these clients also ask not only the number, but also they want to understand what is the landscape, the global landscape about policies, and so you will have to answer properly. And it's I guess that the master, it's also useful in that sense. So from my side, it's some of the opportunities.
Thank you, Flavia. Okay, let's say maybe before opening the floor for questions, and okay, to the participants, if you want to ask a question, you can either type it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll give you the opportunity to speak and directly ask your question. Maybe I could ask you to conclude with some final tips for students, because I guess we mostly have students here today listening to you, who are interested in this type of career, both in Italy but also abroad.
I think I can start with that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to put things a little bit into perspective on why this hybrid or multidisciplinary profiles are required in the work that we do. So in the case of South Pole, so climate projects, which is developing carbon projects, it's our bread and butter. It's part of our DNA. As I said, we have more than 700 emission reduction projects across different sectors. We have one team that is the Climate Projects Unit. I am part of it, and that Climate Projects team is the engine of the company. We have more than 70 professional climate mitigation senior leads, project managers with a variety of profiles that span from engineering, science, biology, geography, GIS, Geographic Information Systems, social, anthropology, business management backgrounds, but also legal backgrounds. Just for instance, I am a lawyer, so I have a background in law, and I'm still there, part of the projects team. What we do in climate projects and why we need this variety of profiles. As I said, we are focused on developing projects, managing them, and developing projects starts from the initial assessment on how to develop a project, but also how these credits or certificates are going to be issued. Then we need to find, part of our team is dedicated to find those projects, developed business and procuring those emission reduction projects or carbon credits. That could be renewable energy certificates, biodiversity offsets, and conducting environmental assessments. So for that, we work with staff that has a heavy technical background. Then another thing that we do in climate projects is managing the deployment of products and services that we have across the company. And this managing the deployment of these projects involves managing those projects, managing as well, or advising, similar to what Flavia said, managing and suggesting how to design a specific strategy for a company, and just taking them and holding them by the hand to get to their desired objective. And then finally, another thing that we do is to help these companies, but also governments, to navigate the climate agenda and the rapidly evolving policy environment, and also helping them finance their emission targets and their net zero journeys. So that's the reason why we need a variety of profiles to implement all those projects on the ground. So to wrap up, what would you need? I think you just need willingness to be part of this mission. It doesn't matter if we have a technical background, a policy background, or a legal background. All of those profiles are needed. So we're not restricted to one specific profile, because we believe that policymakers can be scientists and lawyers as well. So we're not restricted. My first suggestion would be, don't let anyone put you down because you don't have a specific background. Skills can always be acquired by training, and specifically on the job training. And that has been my case as well. I've learned a lot while developing all these projects. So those are my 2 cents for students. Happy to answer further questions. And I don't know if Aurora or Flavia would like to add something.
Thank you, Mireille. That was actually brilliant.
Yeah, should I go, Aurora? Okay. Yeah, completely agree with Mireille, because yeah, I come from a different background as well. So it's been a trip, a journey to be actually part of this change and actor of this transition actually. And from like a very like practical actually tip is then when you like are maybe in this year that are like full-time studying and working maybe as well, to try to also focus on not like not to forget how the market is, where market is going, where like also businesses are going. So what are the needs of the private sector also. So and create like your own interest, for example. And when you have assessment, just a final exams assessment, try to focus on, for example, I did something about the multi-criteria analysis on science-based target, for example, and it was something really interesting because I could connect also the like my internship that would have been and my course, so my class. So just to try to create your own your interest, and that's actually all. Then as Mireille said, you have like all the skills to do it, to also change your job, for example, because you learn a lot by doing, actually. So thank you.
Okay, so I totally quote my colleagues on about the skills and learning by doing opportunities that you can have as a student or as a worker in this sector. My tips are actually two. One is to be flexible, curious, and never be afraid to ask questions, because everything is to be discovered also in this very quickly changing environment. And second, maybe some of the students, or I mean, someone of the people that are listening may realize that studying or working on climate change can be tough, because we are bombarded with sad news about climate impacts increasing every day, or news about how urgent it is to do something. So it can happen to feel demoralized about the context. Is normal. I suggest you to, if this happened to you, I suggest you to look around and find people or friends to share your feelings or your ideas and address the worries together, because tackling climate change is a lot actually, but there are many things, big and small, that we can do, and they are way more effective if we act together. So this is my suggestion.
Thank you. And I guess it's just, yeah, if you just look at the trends, I guess, of also your activities, the number of clients, the number of projects, I would imagine an exponential trend over the last years, and is going to continue that way, which means that those are things that are being done and will be done. So I'm actually optimistic that things can change. Okay, I would now open the floor for questions. So it is now really your opportunity to speak with Aurora, Flavia, and Mireille. So please go ahead. You can also read the question on the chat. So there is a question by Martino, who is a master's student this year. Can you briefly describe in practice an example of a typical project?
Maybe I can answer that back with another question: in which type of project? A consultancy project with a corporate client, or an emission reduction project? Because I guess what I can say, how if we take the emission reduction project, it is completely different to a consultancy one, and I would leave Flavia and Aurora to expand on that. But if it is an emission reduction project, what we do from the beginning to the end, we find where is that project going to be developed? What type of project is going to be? Is that going to be a renewable energy project, an energy efficiency project, forestry project, or a carbon removal project from, let's say, carbon capture and storage? What we do is conducting a feasibility assessment. whether or not that project can actually be developed, if it is if it has potential to reduce emissions or remove emissions. So then if that is a yes, then we find what would be the applicable methodology to certify, to monitor, measure, verify, and certify those emission reductions or removals, to then apply that methodology, run some numbers. When we get the numbers of the potential reduction of emissions or the removal of emissions of that specific project, then that project is verified by a third party, then it's certified, and then it generates credits. And those credits, that is the final stage of a project, those credits they have different pathways to be used. They can be used towards the target of a company, or it can be traded in the voluntary carbon market to other buyers in the market. So it could be other companies, or those credits could actually be used for compliance purposes when there is a regulation that obliges a company to comply with a specific reduction of emissions, so they can use those credits to compensate for those emissions. But then again, are different types of emission reduction projects, and the dynamics of those as well as the market change, that could actually impact somehow the development of that emission reduction project. So that is talking about carbon projects. Now, consultancy projects.
Yes, same we can say for a climate strategy project from a consultancy side. I mean, Flavia, if you want to add something, feel free, but I can easily say that it's very different to develop a carbon footprint of an organization, a product, or a service. Is different from mapping scope 3 emission of a company, and as well as can be another typical project, let's say, can be setting a science-based target, and it imply different methodology, shared standard, shared international standard. So we really need a wide variety of knowledge and expertise, and I can say that we do not have a typical project, neither in the consultancy or carbon project development side. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah.
Or Mireille.
Completely. Yeah, there is not a typical one actually, because clients keep asking different. They are different needs. If we want to say, like, nowadays there is this huge increase of setting the targets, so you go through the carbon footprint, you need to go through the audit, so someone need to assure that what you did is fine, and then you start like calculating, so with the numbers actually, with the different scenarios, and see depending on your strategies of decarbonization, when and if and when you will get to one target, and then you decide which is the most suitable one. You have to submit this target, so it's a very it's quite huge work behind that. And what I say is that you really each project is different, and you have to study mainly also different, for example, different methodologies or different approaches to calculate. Not all the scope 3 emissions are the same, and for different sectors. So just with the basic thing, which is a carbon footprint, you have to also create your methodology sometimes. So it's also inspiring on that in that sense.
Yeah, I can add that that also this this very wide variety of project can be found also within the same category. For instance, it's very different to set a science-based target for a fashion company than in a financial organization or an heavy emitting business. So even within the same service, let's say, we could really find very different challenges and opportunities, let's say.
Yeah, is Giusy Pellegrini, she's asking whether there is use a particular software to work in climate consulting.
Flavia, you have some answer for this?
Well, depending on what you will you will do. It depends. You start from, you can simply use Excel for the basic services. And for example, it depends for if you have to work on a risk assessment, there will be different tools and software that also South Pole is and South Pole is also developed. So it depends actually on what you are doing. And here in Campos, we also have tools for clients in order to manage their emissions. So it's really and if you work on the carbon part, yes, there is a lot of more software, more programming inside. But I would say that actually or different companies work with different software, or actually you learn it when you start in it. So it's from the consultancy part in Carbonsink.
On the carbon side, yes, we have specific softwares, particularly when it comes to forestry projects or projects that involve land conservation or biodiversity. We use GIS, Geographic Information Systems, but we also use remote sensing, satellite imagery to map certain areas of land, deforestation to track actually the change at deforestation rates in a specific area, so we can actually measure and monitor the progress of a project. When it comes to biodiversity, remote sensing is also quite useful to track conservation of species and in a specific project as well. There are, for example, South Pole has projects in Central America and South America where we can actually monitor the conservation of the jaguar, and we have some quite cool videos and pictures of the animals actually approaching the cameras, and that's how we can also track the progress of a project. That is for carbon projects. On the consultancy side, we also use that less because we leave that to technical experts, but we use mostly Excel to measure their footprint, but also to calculate or estimate the needs for carbon credits based on the volume that a company requires to compensate or reduce, for example. Yeah, nothing too sophisticated, I must say.
But yeah, I can say that in our program, they have actually many opportunities and to learn about tools, to process and work with remote sensing data, GIS, but other software that are meant to process this type of high resolution data. So actually, over time, we have actually increased the number of courses, specifically like hands-on courses that try to teach students the practicalities of this tool, how to actually use them. So I think this is actually one of the few programs which is so practical. This would be a value added. Maybe can I ask you a question before, when you were mentioning how all different disciplines could play a role and could find house in this type of activities and jobs. You also mentioned anthropology. Could you maybe say maybe give an example of how an anthropologist or someone coming from humanities could fit within this endeavor?
Yes, so for carbon projects, one of the things that project developers, specifically South Pole, is committed to is to ensure that our carbon projects not only deliver results in terms of emission reduction, but also contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And for that, we need to understand how to engage with, specifically with communities, assess their needs, understand their social structures, and how can their decision-making process can facilitate the implementation of an emission reduction project. That's where we need this social approach and this anthropological approach to understand how do they work, how would they take a solution, and how to also train them at the same time to keep using those solutions. For instance, cook stoves. Cook stoves is a type of project in which we work with. So we need to understand how these solutions are being used, implemented, who is actually maintaining those solutions so it can deliver results at the end. And then obviously, once a project is implemented, we need to understand what was the real impact and how that specific project is meeting these goals. Access to energy, gender equity, inclusion, how that project is having an impact beyond climate. That's why we need this type of profiles as well.
Okay, maybe last call for questions.
In the meantime, that we are waiting for the last couple of questions, I can add that about the programming and software use, I can add that even if we basically Excel knowledge is gold to do 90% of the job that we are doing. But even, I mean, a good knowledge and competence on programming, other kind of software is will be more and more required, because the digital development in tools and climate analytics to assist climate services is getting more and more I mean, requested and important. While the trend is growing, it also spread from all sectors and also all dimension of companies or organization. So the knowledge of programming and designing a digital tool is another key competence, I think.
Yeah, and if I may, I would here see, let's say, an immediate opportunity for example, our student who, for example, could try to help you kind of translating the services that you now do in Excel into program-based software such as R or other languages, which would make the workflow more fluent and perhaps efficient. So,
if I may add really quickly to that, so South Pole has now an innovation team that is actually looking into developing these new solutions. It's not only about carbon projects, it's actually automatizing part of the work that we do. So yes, we also need developers, programmers, very knowledgeable on that front to develop these new solutions. And why not new products, maybe new softwares that are not ready in the market, but with this entrepreneurship feeling, there is also a huge range of opportunities for IT, with people with an IT background out there also in the climate space. Maybe developing an app to track real-time emissions. Opportunities are endless now with technology, so I wouldn't be limited by that.
Thank you very much. We will have another appointment, most likely in April on the 13th, and it will be the open day of the master. So we will be presenting our master program, and most likely we will host a consultancy company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, who's also kind of looking into this issue more closely. If you want to receive updates, you can always sign up to the CMCC newsletter, and you will receive a notification about these events, but also all events organized by CMCC. Okay, so I would like to thank our guest. It has been really nice and really inspiring. And I believe we will be in touch.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the attention. I mean, we are open to any kind of question or details the audience can have. So if there are some questions, please feel free to send it to us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's been really, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you all. Yes, and if you want to just reach out.
Yes, you can follow up with me, and then I can put you in touch with Aurora, Flavia, and Mireille.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good rest of the day.